The wind carried dust like smoke, rolling across the bones of the land. Dry grass swayed, brittle and yellow, as hooves struck the earth in rhythmic defiance. A lone rider cut across the horizon, dark coat flapping, hat drawn low, reins taut in gloved hands. Beneath her, a black mare with eyes like smoldering coals pressed forward, unbothered by the weight it carried. A rifle lay strapped along the saddle's length, worn from use, not display. The revolver on her hip shifted with each movement catching slivers of the setting sun. Her face, shadowed by the brim of her hat, betrayed nothing. But her eyes were flint. They laughed when she rode into town, not all of them. Some just watched, slouched behind bottles or blinking through sun-scorched lashes. But enough of them laughed. At the dust-caked boots, the coat torn at the shoulder, the quiet determination that didn't fit the rules they knew. Women came into towns like these for one reason: desperation, to beg or to barter or to bury someone. But she came with a purpose more dangerous than all three. She dismounted outside the saloon. Boots hit the ground with a soft thud. Her horse remained still, trained by more than kindness. She pushed open the doors with her left hand, her right brushing the edge of her holster. The piano inside faltered. A bottle shattered on the floor. Murmurs spread like brush fire. No one recognized her, and that was part of the point. She wasn't from here, wasn't from anywhere now, not since they took everything. "Where's my daughter's killer?" she asked. Silence bloomed across the room like blood on linen. The bartender, pale and thin, face creased with cowardice, froze behind his counter. A man with a chest full of silver buttons snorted, lifted his glass, and took a slow sip. "Lady," he said, his voice slick as oil, "you got the wrong place for fairy tales and ghost stories." She didn't blink. "I'll ask one more time." Someone chuckled from the corner. "Ain't no place for orphans and firebrands," another said. The laughter returned, nervous, testing, tinged with something meaner. She stepped forward, boot heels scraping the wood. The silence deepened, stretching thin. "The men who burned my home rode this direction. I tracked them through broken scrub, over riverbeds dry as sin, through towns too scared to talk. They came here." The man, with the silver buttons, leaned back, unimpressed. "Lot of men ride through here, ma'am. One of them wore a red bandana stitched with bone beads, tall, scar from jaw to ear. Another was missing his trigger finger. The last had a war medal around his neck, Confederate issue. You remember now?" No one answered. "I want names." The bartender cleared his throat. "Look, miss." She drew her revolver. "Clean, quick, no wasted motion." The hammer clicked. She didn't aim it at anyone, just held it, steady as a heartbeat. The way someone does when they mean it. That was when the laughter truly stopped. She holstered the gun again, not out of mercy but calculation. If they weren't going to talk here, they'd talk elsewhere. Fear had a long echo. Outside, the light dimmed. The wind picked up, whistling between buildings that leaned like old drunks. She didn't turn when the saloon doors creaked behind her. She didn't have to. She knew someone was following her. A child stepped into her path, no more than 11, dirt on her face and bare feet toughened by gravel. She pointed toward the stables. "Old man at the smithy saw him," the girl whispered. "Said they were bragging about a fire." The woman knelt to her level, her voice softened but her eyes stayed sharp. "What else did he say?" "They had a map. One of them said Fort Redemption, said it was still good for moving. Things no one wants found." The woman reached into her coat and pulled out a tiny silver button, pressed it into the child's palm. "For your silence." The girl nodded, vanished between two buildings like smoke. She turned toward the blacksmith's workshop. The forge glowed faintly through the cracks in the planks. She pushed the door open with her shoulder. Inside, iron hung like ornaments, horseshoes and tools clinking in the breeze. The blacksmith, a man with one eye and an arm like a tree trunk, looked up from his work. He didn't flinch. Maybe he saw something in her face that told him it was easier to speak than to stall. "They passed through," he said, wiping sweat with a rag. "Red bandana, missing finger, Confederate chain. Bragged about it. Took whiskey, paid in Union gold. Left 2 days ago. Headed west. Fort Redemption. That's what they said. Place ain't what it used to be. Now it's where filth goes to fester." She nodded once, turned to go. "Wait," he said. "You won't make it alone. Trail's rough, no law, wolves and worse." She met his eye. "I've already walked through worse," and she had. Weeks ago, her cabin sat quiet under a red morning sky. Her daughter had drawn pictures on the wall with coal, small hands sketching stars, horses, her mother. The fire came fast, the sound of hooves, screams, a bottle through the window, heat and terror. She'd woken coughing, dragged herself out. Lungs on fire, her daughter was gone. The men didn't take supplies. Just her daughter and the one thing that could still break her. The knowledge she hadn't protected her child. They told her to grieve. The sheriff offered a shrug. Girls go missing. Towns go quiet about it. She left that night. Saddlebag, packed, heartstone set. She slept in dry riverbeds, fought off coyotes with nothing but fire, and pulled her own tooth when rot set in. She bled in silence. She endured without witness. The trail was long, but she'd grown colder with each mile. Not cruel, just carved into something no longer delicate. As she saddled her horse again that evening, she noticed the man watching her. He stood at the edge of town, beside a tree, long dead. Tall, shoulders like carved stone, hair braided in a way that spoke of tribes the government had tried to erase. He wore no badge, no color, no smile, just stood there watching. She didn't acknowledge him, just rode past, but she felt his eyes on her long after the town vanished behind a hill of ash and prairie weeds. That night she made camp beside a creek bed. The water barely moved. She lit a fire with care, turning the coals inward to keep the light low. Coyotes howled in the distance. Her mare shifted uneasily. She cleaned her revolver by firelight, hands moving with practiced grace. The blacksmith's words echoed. Wolves and worse. She didn't fear wolves. Sleep came in flickers. Images, her daughter's hair catching sunlight, her voice calling her mother's name. She woke with a start. The fire was out. The horse was gone. She reached for her gun and stopped. A figure crouched at the edge of camp. It was him, the watcher. He held her reins. Her mare stood calm, as if no threat had ever passed near. He placed the reins beside her, turned to leave. She stared after him. Why help? He paused, turned slightly, not enough to show his whole face. They'll kill you if you go alone, he said, voice quiet as embers. I'm not afraid to die, she said. He didn't argue. Instead, he disappeared into the trees. When morning came, his tracks remained, near the creek bed, parallel to hers, separate but close. She rode on. Dust filled the air like memory. The trail forked, and she chose the narrower path, less traveled, more dangerous, marked by boot prints and something else. A smear of blood. Not old, days, maybe less. Her heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. She wasn't near the end. But she was getting close. At a bend in the trail, she found a rag caught on a branch. Torn. Faded red. Stained dark. She dismounted. Pressed the cloth to her lips. She was near. Above her, vultures circled. She mounted again. No prayer, no promise. Only the weight of what had been taken, and what she would take back. She rode harder. The trail narrowed into a canyon, walls towering like cathedral spires. Echoes bounced back with every hoofbeat. Time didn't exist here. Only the pursuit. As night approached again, she crested a ridge and saw it. Smoke in the distance. A low fire, a lean-to, and 3 horses tied near a cluster of rocks. She dismounted silently, heart thudding not with fear, but readiness. The revolver, felt warm in her hand. 3 men. She needed only one alive. She vanished into the dark, moving like a shadow. The next morning, only 2 horses remained, and 1 man lay dead. His throat opened cleanly. Beside him, something glinted. She picked it. A silver chain, Confederate issue, and beneath it, the smallest thing, a wooden button carved with a flower. Her daughter had sewn it onto her doll's dress. Now it was stained with blood. She looked to the west, where the canyon widened into flatlands, and beyond that, the place they called Fort Redemption. She whispered one word. Soon. Then she mounted again and rode into the fire-colored dawn. The snow came sudden, as if the sky had grown tired of mercy. She guided the mare through a narrow mountain pass, the wind clawing at her coat and needles of ice slicing into her cheeks. The storm hadn't been there an hour ago, but now it was, swallowing the trail whole. The sun was gone behind a wall of gray, and her hands were so cold she couldn't feel the reins anymore. Somewhere behind her, far enough to be forgotten by weaker minds but close enough to haunt hers, was the man she'd left alive. He hadn't begged. He'd tried to fight, even with a bullet in his gut and death grinning over his shoulder. But she hadn't killed him out of mercy. She needed answers. He'd told her the same name as the blacksmith, Fort Redemption. And then he'd laughed. Not out of courage, but cruelty. She screamed, he said. Your little girl, real high and sharp, bet she's dead by now, or worse. That was when she put the muzzle to his mouth and said nothing. She didn't fire. She just let him live long enough to bleed into the earth like the coward he was. That would be punishment enough, and the coyotes would do the rest. Now she pressed, on through the snow, searching for cover before night came in full. The mare stumbled, nearly buckling from exhaustion. She dismounted, patted the animal's neck, then led her by the bridle, watching the cliffs for signs of shelter. Each step was harder than the last. Her shoulder still ached from the cougars, teeth 2 weeks back, and the cold was making the old wound throb like a second heartbeat. She saw the cave by accident, an opening in the rock barely visible beneath a curtain of pine. It didn't look like much, but it was better than dying upright. Inside, it smelled of damp moss and ash. Someone had used it recently. There were ashes in the pit, faintly warm. She crouched, pulled dry brush from her satchel, and built a fire. The crackle and light felt unreal after so much wind and white. She removed her gloves, flexed her numb fingers, then reached for her canteen. Frozen. Of course. She cursed softly, and then behind her, something shifted. She spun, revolver already half drawn, but it was too late. He stood there, just inside, the mouth of the cave, snow trailing from his shoulders. He hadn't made a sound. Not when he arrived, not when he moved. It was the same man from the tree line in town, the one who had followed her. He looked unchanged, his eyes unreadable, one hand resting near a knife that hung from his belt. She stood slowly, breath steady but blood pounding in her ears. Looking to rob me? She asked. He didn't respond, just stepped forward past the flame and dropped something beside her pack, a leather pouch. Inside, dried meat, and a bundle of herbs tied in sinew. She looked at him again. You tracked me. He nodded once. Why? This time, he spoke. Quiet, low, a voice made for wind and shadow. You're not the only one looking for something. She didn't ask what. If he wanted to talk, he would. If he didn't, she wouldn't force it. She'd learned long ago that survival stripped people down to their essentials. She respected silence more than most. Still, she watched him. He sat, across from her, tending his own knife, hands deliberate, almost reverent. His face held no fear, not even suspicion, just that stillness, the kind people forgot existed in men. She studied his features. Scarred above the brow, a line across, the jaw that wasn't from any accident. His skin bore the story of hard winters and harder choices. Some blood in him was native, maybe more than half, but the rest was frontier steel, the kind born when 2 worlds collided and left only ruin in their wake. Name? She asked. He didn't give one. She didn't press. You know the way too. Fort Redemption. I know the ground before it, he said. You've been? He looked into the fire. Long ago, when it was still a place worth fearing. Now it was something worse. A place forgotten by maps but remembered in nightmares. Outlaws, deserters, broken men who traded flesh for whiskey and blood for silver. No law dared approach. No army patrol. Stayed long. I need to get there before they move her again, she said. He didn't nod, but he didn't argue either. That was enough. She took the herbs he brought, ground them into water from the cave's melting ice, and sipped. The taste was bitter, but it warmed her gut. The fire burned low. Night crept in, heavy and cold. Outside, the storm cried against the stone. She thought of her daughter, wondered if she was warm somewhere or freezing like she had on that first night without her mother. Maybe her daughter had stopped believing anyone would come. Maybe she'd been told her mother was dead. Sometimes lies are easier to survive. Sleep came in shifts. She dreamt of fire, flames licking cabin walls, screams tangled in smoke, tiny hands reaching out. She woke gasping. He was still there, sitting upright, untouched by sleep. You don't dream? She asked. He stirred the fire. Not of things I want to remember. The next morning they moved without words. Packed, saddled, mounted. The land flattened as they left the ridge. The snow gave way to frost-bitten soil and leafless trees that cracked in the wind like bones underfoot. Ravens circled overhead, following them. They knew death when they saw it. She watched the man's back as he rode ahead. He didn't look back, but he waited when she lagged. At night, he built the fire. She cooked. They didn't speak of trust. They simply built it, one unspoken favor at a time. On the fourth day, they found a wagon turned to kindling. Smoke still curled from the broken axles. 4 bodies lay scattered. 2 adults, 2 children. She dismounted in silence. One of the children had hair like her daughter's. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She dropped to her knees, checking for signs, bruises, bullet wounds, chains. The children hadn't been shot. They'd been hanged. She stood and turned away, eyes burning. He buried them while she kept watch. Afterward, she carved a small wooden charm, a flower, like the one on her daughter's doll, and left it hanging from a branch. Neither of them said a word as they rode on. That night, he spoke again. There was a girl once, he said, staring at the fire, taken in spring. We searched. We begged. No one helped. She was never found. She didn't ask if the girl was his sister, his child, his friend. Some things didn't need names. They say Fort Redemption is run by a man named Harlan Briggs, she said. Used to be Union cavalry. Now he runs trade like a butcher runs a shop. He nodded. Knows how to vanish. Pays well to be forgotten. But someone always remembers, she said. He didn't answer, but his eyes confirmed it. He remembered. Days passed. The air grew warmer. The trees returned, knotted and strange, their bark split and weeping amber. Signs of people. Boot prints, ash piles, abandoned fire pits. They were getting close. They followed a ravine until it opened into a dry basin. At the center, a ruined chapel, stone walls half collapsed. Inside, they found signs of a recent camp. Tobacco, jerky, broken glass. No blood, but carved into the wall with a knife. A name. Her daughter's. She traced the letters with trembling fingers. The child had carved it. She knew the shape of her own child's letters, jagged and small, pressed deep from fear or urgency. She was here, she said. He studied the ground. They didn't stay long. She's alive. We're close. They didn't stop to sleep that night. The moon lit their way, pale and hard. Every sound, twigs snapping, owls crying, wind through the brush, felt sharper, more dangerous. Just before dawn, they crested a hill. There it was, Fort Redemption. Not a fort anymore, but a wound in the land. Barbed wire ringed the outer walls. Fires burned in oil barrels. The silhouettes of men with rifles stood watch like gargoyles. She exhaled, slowly. Not from fear, from certainty. This was the place. She turned to the man beside her. "You coming?" He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply drew his knife, tested the edge, and said, "Let's finish this." Together they vanished into the dark. Dawn crawled over the basin like a wounded animal, bleeding light in streaks across the rusted bones of Fort Redemption. Smoke from cook fires clung to the air, sour with grease and gunpowder. The gates, once proud timber and iron, now leaned, crooked, patched with scrap and shielded by the men who called this place their last kingdom. They wore no uniforms, just layers of worn leather and dust, eyes dull with violence, fingers never far from triggers. From the ridge, she watched the patrols change shift. 4 men at the north wall, 3 at the watchtower, 2 more down by the stables. Their rhythm wasn't military, not anymore. Too many of them were drunk or limping. Complacency had grown here like fungus. Still, it was dangerous. She lay flat, chin pressed to stone, breath shallow. Her companion crouched nearby, eyes scanning patterns in the dirt and distance. Neither spoke. Words would only distract from what their instincts already understood. They had one chance. No second tries. The child was in there somewhere. Maybe. Alive, maybe not. She wouldn't think about that. Couldn't. The image of her daughter's name carved into the chapel wall was the only tether keeping her soul from unraveling. That carving meant she had been strong, brave, trying to leave. A trace behind. A signal for her mother. That was enough to make dying worth it. Her ally reached into his satchel and pulled out a handful of dirt, crushed sage and ash. He rubbed it along his neck and arms, disguising scent, blending with the earth. She followed his example. The ritual didn't need explanation. It was the same in all languages. Hide your body, hide your fear. At midday, they circled the fort's perimeter from the west. Less patrols, fewer eyes. There was a small breach where time and weather had pried the foundation loose. A boy could squeeze through. So could a desperate woman. They waited for shadows to shift. The sentries above turned toward the chapel ruins behind them, distracted by movement from wind or ghosts. That was their chance. She slipped down the slope first, knees steady, feet finding purchase between roots and dry brush. Her heart pounded loud enough to hear. The cold steel of her revolver tapped softly against her hip. Every breath was a thread, in a needle-eye of terror. Her companion followed, silent as dusk. They reached the wall and pressed their backs against it, ears tuned to voices nearby. Men grumbled about cards, women, and missing boots. None of them spoke of prisoners. She dropped to her stomach and wormed through the breach. The inside smelled of sweat, smoke, and decay. Barracks had become hovels. Wagons rusted beside piles of broken crates. Dogs scavenged along the alleys, ribs sharp beneath mangy fur. People were here, but not the kind anyone would save. She crouched, staying low, using the stacked debris as cover. Her partner remained behind the wall, waiting, watching. Then she heard it, a child's voice, faint, muffled. She froze, eyes wide. There it was again, beneath the stable. Somewhere deep in the belly of the compound, a soft sound barely above a breath. But it was a child's. She moved without thinking. Past the iron stove, behind the storage barrels, through the rows of sleeping drunkards. She slipped through shadows, like water through fingers, rage turning her limbs to steel and silence. The stable loomed ahead. The doors hung crooked. A figure slept against one post, a bottle between his legs. She drew her knife and crept past. Inside, it was cooler. Flies buzzed near piles of manure and rotted feed. Horses shifted in their stalls, snorting with unease. She found the hatch near the back, partly hidden beneath sacks of grain. Wood slats, iron hinges, no lock. Just a hook on the inside. She unlatched it, hands trembling. A ladder led down into blackness. She didn't hesitate. The descent was slow, the rungs old and splintering. The air thickened with each foot down, rank with mildew and damp earth. Then, light. A lantern hung from a nail, dim, flickering. She turned. There were cages, not large, not clean. 3 of them, made from scavenged wood and rusted iron. Inside, 2 children. 1 boy, face streaked with filth, eyes hollow. And her breath caught. The second girl was hers. Gaunt, pale, bruised at the temple, but alive. Their eyes met. No sound passed between them, only recognition. A flood of it, grief, relief, guilt, and something older than words. The boy stirred. "Are you the angel she talks about?" he whispered. She dropped to her knees and wrenched the cage door. The wood cracked, the latch snapped. Her daughter crawled forward, legs shaking. They fell into each other, silent, clutching like survivors on a sinking ship. "I came," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "I came for you." Footsteps, above. Shouting. The guard was awake. She grabbed the boy's hand and lifted her daughter with the other. "We move now." The latter groaned under their weight. She pushed the children up first, then followed. When they reached the stable floor, the shouting had grown. Gunfire erupted somewhere near the gate. Her partner had made his move. He'd drawn the attention. Just as planned. She shoved sacks over the hatch and fled with the children through the back wall, which had split from years of neglect. They ran. Dogs barked. A bell rang. Not from Faith, but alarm. She ducked behind the blacksmith's shed. Voices closed in. "Split up." She went that way. "Check the stables." She pressed the children flat against the dirt. The boy trembled. Her daughter didn't cry. Too, afraid for tears. Just held tight to her arm, heart pounding like a trapped bird. A shadow passed. Then silence. She peeked out. Clear. They ran again, this time toward the breach. Toward hope. Then a shot rang out. She twisted, shoving the children ahead. The bullet grazed her side, burned like fire. She bit back the scream. More footsteps. Then another sound. Sharp, brutal. A cry. Then a man's scream cut short. Her ally appeared. Bloody, knife in hand. Jaw clenched. He said nothing. Just grabbed the boy and nodded at her to keep going. She gritted her teeth, pressing one hand to her bleeding side. They reached the breach together, slipped through, gasping, into open air. Bullets whistled past them. Dirt exploded near her boots. One clipped the mare's flank. She screamed, but didn't fall. They mounted. She pulled her daughter into the saddle with her, the boy behind the man. He kicked his horse hard and they thundered westward, hooves tearing through frost and dust and smoke. Behind them, the fort vanished like a fever dream. Her side throbbed. She could barely see straight, but her daughter was warm against her chest, alive. She heard the child whisper, "You found me." Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot against the wind. "I never stopped looking," she said. They rode for miles, not daring to stop. When night fell, they made camp by a dry creek. No fire, no noise, just silence and breath. Her ally cleaned her wound with care, saying little. She winced but didn't cry out. Her daughter held her hand the whole time. The boy slept nearby, arms wrapped around his knees. She watched the stars appear above them, strange and sharp. She turned to the man beside her. "Why did you help?" He paused. "Because no one helped when I needed it." She nodded. Then, "You were right. This place, it's worse than death." He looked at her, quiet for a long moment. "But you didn't die." "No," she said, "but something inside me did. And something else took its place." Her daughter stirred in her sleep, fingers still wrapped around her mother's coat. "Tomorrow," she said, "we ride to a place that's safe." He didn't ask where, because safety wasn't a place anymore. It was people, and she wasn't done yet. The wind was softer now, not kind, never that, but quieter. The storm had passed days ago, leaving behind skies stretched wide and pale as old parchment. The road ahead curved through mesas and canyons, each bend hiding the unknown. But the worst of it, the part that bled and begged and burned, was behind them, or so they thought. She rode with her daughter tucked close, wrapped in a spare blanket, too thin for real warmth, but thick with her mother's scent. The girl didn't speak much. Her voice was quiet now, worn by fear and silence. But her grip never loosened. Small hands clung to her mother's waist, even in sleep. The boy rode ahead with the silent man. The two of them formed a strange mirror. One, old and carved from loss, the other young and shaped by it. They didn't speak, yet they understood each other, as people marked by ruin often do. Their goal wasn't a town, not yet. It was a ridge the man had spoken of, a hidden plateau with water, shelter, and a view clear enough to see trouble before it arrived, a place where wounded souls could catch their breath. But nothing about the journey was easy. Her wound had worsened. The bullet graze, ignored in the chaos of escape, had become infected. Her side burned like fire beneath her coat. Each jolt of the saddle sent waves of agony through her, but she never let her daughter see. Pain was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. The man knew. Of course he did. She saw it in the way he adjusted the pace, slowed his horse when hers faltered, glanced back with unspoken questions. But he said nothing. Because he understood too. Pain was not the end, only the cost. That night, as they camped beneath a grove of dead trees, he knelt beside her as she lay curled near the fire, sweat darkening her collar. "You need rest," he said. "I'll rest when she's safe," she replied, voice hoarse. He held her gaze. There was no pity in him, only recognition. "You can't outrun blood loss. I can't stop." He didn't argue. Just handed her a strip of jerky and sat beside her daughter, showing the girl how to sharpen a stick into a toy. Small gestures, acts of quiet care. They meant more than she could say. The next morning, the boy found tracks, fresh ones, horses, 3 of them, moving fast, men from the fort. She didn't ask how far behind. She didn't need to. She could feel it. The way the air had changed, the way her gut twisted with old fear. Death had not stayed behind the walls of Fort Redemption. It had followed. They moved faster, no more resting, no more stopping for fire or food. The children held on tight. The trail grew rough, narrow, twisted between canyons like the veins of some dying giant. Her vision blurred. Her breath rattled. But she stayed upright, willed herself forward. By dusk, the man pulled them off the trail, into a hollow beneath a crag of red rock. The children nestled in a corner, huddled together for warmth. The man kept watch. She lay flat, teeth clenched against pain. When the sun dipped low, gunshots echoed behind them. 3. Sharp. Close. Then silence. She tried to sit. Her body refused. The man returned just after moonrise, blood on his knife. A bullet nick across his arm. He crouched beside her. "Only one left," he said. She nodded, too weak for words. He watched her, then slowly reached for her revolver. "Let me finish it." She caught his wrist. "No," she whispered. He waited. "I need to be the one." The last man from Fort Redemption wasn't a killer by trade. He was a survivor, a tracker, sent to clean up the mess, the kind of man who killed when paid, but always from a distance. Now he was closer than he liked. She found him at dawn, cornered in a ravine with no clear escape. He fired first, wild, panicked. The shot missed. She didn't. Her bullet struck his leg. He went down hard, screaming, cursing. She approached slowly, breath ragged, revolver shaking in her grip. "Please," he gasped. "I didn't touch her. I swear, just followed orders." She looked at him. Really looked. A man. Nothing more. Dirty, afraid, bleeding. And yet he'd known. He'd seen her daughter caged and said nothing. He'd ridden to silence her, to to protect men who carved scars into children. She knelt beside him. He whimpered, flinching. "You know what it feels like," she said, voice low, calm. "To be hunted, to be small, to wonder if anyone will ever come. I was just—" She shot him through the heart before he could finish. No rage, no joy, just justice. By the time she returned to the others, the sun was high and heat shimmered, off the rocks like ghosts. Her daughter ran to her, burying her face in her coat. "You're bleeding," the girl whispered. "I'm here," she whispered back. "That's all that matters." The man helped her back onto the horse. The climb to the ridge was steep, brutal. Twice she nearly blacked out, but he held her up, one hand on her back, a presence like stone. At the top she saw it, the plateau, stretched wide, green grass, a spring bubbling from the rocks, the remains of an old hunting shelter half hidden by trees. A place lost to time, a place untouched by the world below. They made camp there. For days, she drifted between fever and sleep. He kept the children fed, taught them how to catch rabbits, clean wounds, read the sky. Her daughter laughed again, once, then twice. A high, sweet sound like birds after thunder. When she finally sat up, the boy brought her a bowl of stew. "Duo." Man sat across from her, sharpening his blade. "You saved us," she said quietly. "I didn't do it for you," he replied. She smiled faintly. "I know. But I stayed for her, her daughter." She looked over. The girl was braiding wildflowers into the boy's hair. The two of them giggled like siblings. "Then stay," she said. He paused. "Not forever," she added. "Just until she doesn't flinch at shadows." He nodded. That night, under a sky stitched with stars, she lay with her daughter curled beside her, small hand resting over her heart. "You won't leave again?" the girl whispered. "Never," she answered. But deep down she knew. The world didn't stop. It turned endlessly, dragging pain and joy alike in its wake. One day someone else would cry out. And when they did, her daughter would understand what it meant to ride into fire. But not today. Today, she was just a mother, whole, again, and for now that was enough. The fire crackled. The wind whispered through the trees. Peace. Hard-won, imperfect peace. She leaned back, watching embers rise into the night, and knew this. Some stories don't end with a door closing. They end with a gate left open, just wide enough for someone else to walk through, or ride. Gun in hand. Heart unbroken, because once upon a time they laughed when she rode into the saloon with a gun. But no one was laughing now. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe for more tales from the frontier, and share this with someone who believes in the strength of a mother's love. Until next time, ride safe and never stop searching.